Happy Friday, everyone. How are you? Hope you have all had a very good week, and we're back for another installment of the Giant Step Instagram Live series. Want to let you also know about our vault, which is giantstep.net/vault, where a lot of the stuff that we're talking about on today's Instagram Live is going to be found. And I'm very happy to have Camella, the founder of 555 Soul, and I'm going to just get her to join now. There she is. She is coming. It'll be good to see her. There she is.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Maurice. How are you?
I'm good, Camella. How are you doing?
Not bad. How's everyone?
Yeah.
How's the family?
Family is good, thank you. And how's your family?
Doing well, considering these circumstances.
Yeah, well, it's great to see you, and I'm so happy you joined me on this because you know, as we're going to get into it, those who know those who know, but those who don't know are going to find out. And I see Pauline from Los Angeles, from Funk Essentials, is on.
Pauline,
Hi,
West
Pauline.
Coast.
Yeah. So I want to kind of get straight in it. And when I announced that you were going to be on, Kevin Lyons, who just joined as well, he sent me a really nice text about you. And I kind of felt that summarized much more eloquently than I can about who you are. So Kevin, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to directly steal the text that you sent me about Camella.
Aww.
So he said, Camella is the mother, the grandmother, the great aunt, the big sister of the whole streetwear legacy.
Whoa.
Without her little shop on Ludlow, the likes of many brands would not ever have seen the light of day. And her influence on the downtown music scene is underappreciated. 555 Soul, half zips, sock hats with a uniform of the acid jazz and hip hop indie scenes. Della, Tribe, Jamalski, Mos Def, Diggable. She defined a generation of us and was also present on each and every Giant Step stage and dance floor. So I thought that was beautiful. Thank you, Kevin.
Oh, Kevin.
And I think that sort of like sets it up well for the conversation. Because I want to obviously, you know, talk about, you know, the evolution of 555 Soul and how we met and what you've been doing since. But I think it's always good to kind of start, you know, how you got started, where you grew up, what your influences were. Were you even interested in fashion? How did it come about that you came to New York and sort of started this phenomenon?
Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Maurice. Thank you, Kevin. I'd have to say, you know, I've always been interested in sewing. I started sewing at a really young age. My mother taught me how to make stuff. And then when I got into high school, I really got into actually making art. I was into painting and drawing. And then with my use of the sewing machine, I was like, well, I can sew paintings. So I was doing a lot of like mixed media experimental stuff. And I was fortunate enough to have a high school teacher at the time who, it was sort of like an arts type high school, but she was real into her students. So I really lucked out by having like this amazing mentor. And she pushed me constantly to like show my work, put my work together, and basically applied me to Parsons and Pratt. She sent my portfolio.
Where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I was born in Cleveland. I don't know if everyone knows that. Cleveland, Ohio. Divorced parents. My mom took off and moved us to Florida at a fairly young age. And we moved around a bunch. So I never really set my roots like with any group or circle of friends. So I guess, you know, just turned to my creativity. I had two like best friends, Joe and Jerome, shout out if you're listening. And we would get together and make art together. And then we all ended up in New York City at a really young age. So I think I was like 18 or something when I had my eyes set on getting to New York. So I took a summer program at Parsons It's so funny because I even remember I had Tim Gunn as like a teacher. And
Wow.
I know, it's funny, but it was interesting because I was so intimidated by the fashion world. Like I didn't really feel like I fit that mold of destined to be a fashion person. It kind of, not disgusted me, that's a big word, but it kind of put me off a bit. The,
Just
you
the,
know,
yeah,
the
yeah.
status quo.
Right, and actually very similar to my feeling about the established music business as well, because they they had their establishment, they had their norms, and obviously we were thinking outside the box. When you were growing up, did you have any fashion influences? Were there sort of
Oh yeah.
designers?
I mean,
Yeah.
Jean-Paul Gaultier, Issey Miyake, Yohji Yamamoto, all the creatives at Comme des Garçons. I think she was kind of, yeah, still kind of under the radar. But I really loved like Jean-Paul Gaultier. Anyone super like kind of flashy and eccentric,
Right.
I adored.
And what about music? Were you listening to a type of was music a big influence on you?
I mean, definitely. Like as a young person, for sure. I think a lot of it was coming out of London, a little more punk or goth,
Hmm.
definitely like all of that type of music. Again, art student, you know, the
Yeah,
vibe.
yeah,
It
yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
until I got to New York till I really expanded and like by living in downtown New York and that culture and like finding out about like house music and hip hop like that. It was kind of like the early aunts of that in downtown New York.
Yeah. So you came to New York, and this was what, in
It
eight,
was, I'm still trying to jog my memory, but it
right?
was around 88 because I did accept the scholarship to, I had come to New York prior to do a summer thing, and that's when I went to Parsons and lived in Union Square in like a dorm. So I felt like so cool being so young and like on my own in Union Square. But I chose Pratt because I could dual in fine art and fashion. So I did that in like 88. And then after a year, I realized school was like a really hard thing to do,
But
considering
you
I
loved
wanted
New
to do it.
York. But you loved New
Yeah,
York.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. I mean, I was already working. This is what you and I need to kind of get into and talk about because we met early on, Maurice. But I met this woman in the East Village, and I was working for her, and I was helping her make things for her store and for the Tower Records flea market.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I was making my tie hats then.
Yeah, and the Tower Records flea market came up last week as well when Richard was talking because he was working for Shin. I don't know if you remember
Oh,
Shin,
no.
and so that was a very influential flea market back in the day because there weren't
Yeah.
really that many flea. There was the one up in Chelsea on a Sunday,
That was more
at
antiques,
more antiques,
right?
but this was like kind of the only place where you could find these sort of very, young, up and coming designers.
You know who
If they
was there,
wanted to,
Maurice? It's so funny. James Debbia and Marianne.
right, and
I
went on
used to
to
be
open,
right next to them.
and then they went up to, then they opened Union, and then James opened Supreme, and the rest is history. Yeah, because his background was in stores. Yeah, and his
Yeah.
brother
He had
Russell,
Duffer, right? He brought in
Russell,
Duffer.
yep, yep, yep.
So I really we knew each other because I would be there selling for this woman I was working with and selling my tie hats. And that was at the
Hmm.
same time I met Pat Fields as well. So Pat Field would send people to me or like wait for me to sew up stuff to put in her store. Cause I was like, oh, please, please, please. Do you want to buy my hats, please?
And when we were talking earlier this week, we were kind of like trying to work out when we met, and I'm pretty positive it was at the hat shop you were working at in the East Village, because I
Mhm.
used to. This is before Giant Step, so I would promote the parties I was doing at MK and at Nell's, and I would go around on my rollerblades because it was the quickest way to to do my distribution because I couldn't afford to pay anybody to do it, so I'd do it.
They didn't have rollerblades then, did they?
I had roller skates. You're right.
Yes,
You're right. I was on roller skates. It was pre-rollerblades. Jeez.
Yes.
Yeah, rollerblades
We
were
had
in the early
beepers,
90s.
maybe.
Yeah.
We had pagers.
I didn't even
Pagers
have a
and roller
pager back
skates.
there. Yeah. And I remember coming in. I dropped the flyers off, and you were there, and you were helping in the store, but you also had your hats. And I remember talking to you, and I don't know how we started talking, but it was like, would you like to maybe sell your hats at my parties?
Yes.
And
that was really important, Maurice, because I was also selling them at, remember, Car Wash?
Of course, Amanda Shear.
So the car wash parties and then the trip parties on the top of Mars.
Yeah.
I was like the club vendor.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, so we did stuff at Cave Canem. It depends where you're from. K1 Cave Canem.
So that was like First Avenue, right?
Yeah.
Like an old bathhouse.
Roman bathhouse. They would serve ancient Roman food, and there was a bathhouse in the basement, and I don't think anybody ever ate there, but there was lots of debauchery going on.
Yes, of course.
And we did Bond Street,
and MK, which we were talking about,
right?
Which you don't even remember. I'm like, I used to see Leonardo DiCaprio there. You're like, what?
Yeah, so I used to do Thursday nights at MK, and I'd have the ground floor, and I would put on live music. That was my shtick, that I would bring live music. In the basement was a DJ called Adrian B. Skinny Bones, who later changed his name to Stretch Armstrong. Yeah.
Oh my God, Stretch, if you're listening, Skinny Bones.
And Adrian B. And we did a fashion show together, I think, and I think already by then you'd had your clothes on the cover of Paper magazine, and
Oh my God! Speaking of paper, I just pulled out. I'm in the midst of compiling my archives. I just found this one.
Wow, Della, so that was. I mean, was that sort of like, was that like the pivotal a pivotal moment for you where your clothes were being?
For sure. I mean, we're jumping a little bit in the history, the archive in the history, but for sure. I remember having my store on Ludlow, and like, basically it was just a whole tribe of my friends hanging out who knew about it. But eventually friends would be like, oh, I saw a tie hat on someone we didn't know, like in the club. Like,
right. It's like, how did that happen?
Yeah, because it was kind of like I was making clothes for all my friends who were artists, or eventually some of your artists or DJs. They're like, sure, I'll come by and get some clothes. I'm performing tonight at Wetlands, or, I'm going to MC this party at SOBs, or I think it was like right when Soul Kitchen started as well. But, downtown New York was like extra fun.
So, but I mean, I think, I feel that you were a pioneer, and I'll keep repeating that as we go through your story. But people need to understand that back in, what year did the store open on Ludlow? Was it
89?
So back in
I left school and decided to open a store because I was living in the store.
So back in 1989, Ludlow and Stanton, which was where the store was not a very nice neighborhood. Now they have a Soho house. Dodgy. I mean, you were either you were in that neighborhood for two reasons. Either we were going to see you, or people were basically looking for hard drugs. I mean, and you were this young woman who had this store, and we're like, you were in the middle, and you were like the first there, really. Back then.
Well, there was lots of families there and neighbors.
Right,
but it's definitely this constant. It was a constant, like, Dominican, Puerto Rican battle of turf.
Right.
It was downtown New York City. It was definitely a different place.
Right, and you were living there as well. for a while.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it was
And
a store in the front, curtain, apartment in the back, tenement
yeah,
housing,
yeah,
bathtub in the kitchen,
I
chain,
remember.
light bulb.
Yeah.
I remember when I left, I told the real estate person, can I get like a hotel style bathroom and light switches? She looked at me like, what?
And the thing I remember about that store was you were like a magnet for the creatives who were happening in downtown New York at that time. You would go into your store and you'd have your friends hanging out there. You'd be working, you'd be at the sewing machine, and you'd have other people sort of doing stuff and designing stuff, people like Eben and but
Was recruiting friends constantly,
you had
basically.
friends, but it was like I think Nappy G was working there, and and it was really like a center, and then this sort of like you really were capturing what I think the zeitgeist of what was happening at the time. Um, and attracting the fact that the native tongues and the daisy age hip hop artists were being drawn to your fashion, and the graffiti artists, and it was just a very interesting melting pot.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I mentioned, it was like a tribe of us, right? Like it was a whole community of friends that were all creative. So,
David Ellis just joined, so like
hello, Squirm. So it was kind of like a time when if you knew about it, you knew about it, right? It was like this inner circle. I mean, it was downtown New York culture. It's so hard to explain and convey without sounding like, yeah, it was one big party. It was so much
yeah.
fun. But it was like work was fun. Making
It,
my fashion was fun. I would recruit friends. We'd get 40 ounces. We would put up speakers in the backyard, like Kiom Hi-Fi parties. They'd bring in the speakers. We'd have a mic. I would be sewing labels and sweatshirts. When I wanted to sell t-shirts and sweatshirts, all my friends were making them. So I sold those in the store alongside of my clothing. It was a pretty beautiful time. And we didn't really have any of that then, you know.
But the important thing is you were working very hard. It wasn't just about sort of having fun and hanging out. You guys were working and being creative. It was like we were all on this very we were all like, because a lot of us had come to New York to try and do something, and we weren't going to just sit on our asses and like so. And I really felt you guys were the sort of like the hub of that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't feel like I was working hard, but I guess in retrospect, I was working hard. But work was like my life and happiness, as I still like to make it that way,
Yeah, it was I really enjoyed the fact that we got to collaborate a lot together in the early years, and as we started like expanding Giant Step and taking the party on the road to different cities, whether it was Chicago, Boston, DC, Los Angeles, we would also try and bring.
Oh my God, those parties were so good. Yeah, we could have a serious business. I mean, our business model back then, Maurice, is pretty genius if you think about it. All the fashion shows and parties that we did, like to do a fashion show at a club, like that was like the way we did it, I remember that Boston one. That was like Massive Attack, right? They brought those giant speakers. I think they had like a truckload of sound system.
Yeah.
LA, remember when like we had like EasyJet or some cheap flights and we bought like 20 tickets and we all went to LA. Shout out to Julie and Pauline at the LA store.
And I think Julie said that's how she met you, right? Is that?
She, I think she met me when I was living in my store, I think with Chelsea. And that also another big moment was when I met Ali Asher, who was one of the founders of Shut Skates. And the whole skate world was like happening downtown as well. And so there was like all these genres of us converging. But he was like, oh, if you're going to be making these hats, you got to have a logo. Like I didn't even really know what a logo was. Like I wasn't thinking in the box of like as a graphic designer. I was more just sewing and making fashion. So he basically was like, make me a couple crown and tie hats and I'll give you some logos. And that's the original Roman numeral logo is Ali Asher. Super talented.
Never knew that. I never knew
Yeah,
that.
digging
Wow.
digging in the archives. All of this is oral history, you know, which is
Right.
kind of pretty incredible as well, to compile a history of 30 years plus and nothing's on the internet.
Yeah. I think you hit on a very important point, how, you either knew or you didn't know. And if you knew, then you had these things that were magnets that drew you towards the different culture that was happening. You had your store, you had our club, you had, the different graffiti artists. But how people found out about these things, I think, is very interesting, because you have to be a very inquisitive and thirsty person for knowledge to have done the work to do it, because it was much easier. Just, you could be living in New York, or many people were living in New York and had no idea about you guys, up until you guys became a lot more mainstream.
You had to be brave too, right? To
Yeah.
venture down to Ludlow Street below Stanton.
Yes.
Unless I was doing any like marketing or promotion, like when I was, asking Pat Fields to sell my hats, that sort of thing. It's interesting how people found out about it, because I remember to this day, one of my first wholesale accounts was this Japanese guy from Osaka. And he would come into my store with like a bottle of whiskey, and he would literally just hang out and drink and hang out, and he'd have a suitcase, and he would wait for me to sew up my tie hats to take back to his shop. And like, that's like so raw and amazing if you think about it. Like, Japan then was just like, I mean, it's still incredible, right? But for people to like love the downtown New York culture and find out about it and find me is amazing. Same thing with Paz. That was probably another big moment in history for me, for him to come out from Long Island and find my store and have me custom make stuff for him. So he was great.
That's De La Soul you're talking about,
De
possibly
La
De La
Soul.
Soul. Right,
Yeah.
right. So was that the sort of, like, you showed us the cover of Paper magazine? So De La Soul wearing 555 Soul, that wasn't something that they weren't stylized in that by Paper. That was them wearing the clothes because they sought you out, and they loved the clothes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think they had so many stylists. I mean, they had stylists. I remember Stella used to style for them, like the editorial. But at that time, we all had our own sense of style, right? Like that's kind of what streetwear was or has kind of become, right? But the thing about the 555 Soul clothing is you can kind of express yourself in your own way. I mean, it kind of stood out, right? Because I had all these crazy stripy hoodies and hats, which made for DJs and artists to wear it. It looked great.
It was definitely unique and original. And I remember Paper Magazine did a collaboration with Benetton, and they did a big pull-out called the Tribes of New York. And there were all these different tribes, and they asked you to put together your tribe for the photograph. And I don't know if you still have a copy of that Benetton.
Yes.
We've got to find it.
You know what, though, Maurice, that was actually the first issue of Colors. And I think they had reached out to Paper, to Kim and David,
to help them with it
for the voice. And remember, Tuscany, he photographed us, and I was so smitten. I was like, oh my God, amazing. And he loved us. And he also shot a few other tribes of New York, right? Because I remember he did do the Pat Fields kind of voguing crew.
Yeah.
And in that shoot, it was like Bobito, maybe Rich Medina.
In our shoot,
in ours. Stella.
It was Eben. It was Eben.
My art director of
Latasha, I think Natasha Diggs.
Wasn't Bobito in it? Am I getting confused?
Sung
PNB Nation.
Yeah. And you. I think that was it. Yeah. But Bob and
Colors was amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something also I'm kind of exploring and taking a look at as I compile the history. But the fact that we had, not only did we have independent record labels, but we had all these amazing independent magazines. You know what I mean? Like, that's like a very special moment in time when we had, even before like Source and Vibe, like Details, Paper, like it was pretty cool. Like Stress Magazine, Straight from the Lip out in LA.
Straight from the Lip,
Herb.
yeah.
So that sort of connected us as well, right? Because we were all kind of quickly getting interwoven with the West Coast. And that's when like the whole East Coast, West Coast thing kind of started to kick in too in the hip hop world.
Yeah, and we all loved each other, and they were all having beefs with each other. But it really was, it was about finding your network. Now you can do it on social media by finding your friends and your, by common taste. But we literally, it was handcrafted back then, and it wasn't even like there was that many people to choose from. So, when we'd go to LA, it's like, there's a store, Funk Essentials, and it's kind of like the exact, it's like a home away from home. And there's a magazine called Urban, there's a club called Brass, and
Fresh Jive,
Fresh Jive,
Orlando. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Con Art.
And who are some of the other sort of like early streetwear brands that you were in your sort of field at the time?
Well, P&B Nation was like really important. They definitely are so relevant now to this day. The Hello, My Name Is t-shirts that they did about police brutality. Those guys I thought were always like my favorite. Stash Futura, they were doing the GFS.
Yeah.
Guaranteed Fresh Smoke, the Philly Blunt. So we had the Philly Blunt I had. And then along the way came Jeff Staple. He was just a kid. He'd bike up and hang out in the store. And then when he started making t-shirts. So basically all of these guys, I was selling their t-shirts in my store to go alongside my stuff. I wasn't really doing graphics as of yet. I was focused on just cutting and sewing my product.
And Kevin just said you were the first store to carry SSUR as well.
Oh, and Russ as well.
Yeah.
There's two black guys out of Toronto. It was a great moment. And a lot of those guys also would repaint my store. So it was like this canvas, the gate out front, and then the interior. Again, we get our little 40 ounces, big 40 ounces and have a party. So it'd be like a kind of graffiti party / sewing party. Because my sewing machine was right in the store. You were always behind it. And just Raoul from London just joined. So hey,
he's
Raoul. He came later in the picture.
Yeah.
We're trying to reminisce in the early 90s still. So also, do you remember Rico as well? Rico was also really important. So Rico actually, she was doing, when Yo MTV Raps launched, she was doing the Japan side of it, and she was a good friend of mine. So she also brought in she brought a lot of the New York people to me, even though they knew about me. But like she brought Fat Five Freddy to my store a few times. She brought Tribe to my store, and MC Light, I remember. So she was also like a really important player in all of this.
Yeah,
bringing our crew to Japan. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. There were these connectors. We had the same thing for music, and the brand started growing. You started selling outside the store as well. You started distributing. Where were some of the first sort of places that you, besides Japan, where the guy had come with a suitcase full of,
I know. Pat Fields. There was a store called Detente in Soho. Liquid Sky, Carlos, man, that was great. And then slowly some bigger stores kind of trickled in, which I was very reluctant and just not so sure. But, across the United States, like there'd be a store in Chicago or there'd be a store in Detroit or Philly, again, through these like veins or roots of, again, friends through you or through another friend. It was all like, oh, check out my friend. She's, Don Pervert in Miami. You know what I mean? And then we'd all get in. I mean, you were always kind of in that picture as well. We'd do a party, do a fashion show at the party, sell the stuff at the store, have a party at the store.
And things started growing. And, going back to the fact that, I consider you a pioneer, you had this store in Ludlow. And then when you moved out to it, you moved your operation to a far off place called Williamsburg. No. I basically was in over my head on Ludlow Street, kind of over it halfway. I don't know, 5 years into it, I think. And I moved to Mott Street, 262 Mott Street. Okay. And that's where
GFS was, where Stash Futura, Shuts Gates actually had their inventory in the basement. Iggy Pop was there. It was like an epic building. And within that month, I found my space on Lafayette Street. So I had opened Lafayette Street, which was like kind of a no man's land at the time.
It was a total that you
just opened.
You had the Herring pop shop.
Yep, I was good friends with Adolfo next door, and then Supreme.
That was it. Yeah,
no, Supreme was there.
Yeah,
James had just opened, so it's
right.
And but he was never at the store really. You know, it was like Pookie. That's when I met Pookie, Shady, David Press, Yuquan. So the early Supreme tribe. And then I was in my store. I had to make sure I was definitely in my store, but then I was getting really in demand in terms of just expanding the business. So I would go on the weekends and DJ. And
DJ Cute, if I remember correctly.
Yes,
right?
That's right. DJ Cute, named by Papito. I remember doing when APT had opened the first week. I DJ'd and I was so nervous, but I was so excited because I had all of this stuff from like London that I brought back because I was going to London as well because I had the store in London, had the store in LA.
When did the store in London open?
It opened after the LA store. So the LA store was, I don't know, Julie, chime in if you're listening, but like 93. And then London was
and
with Sophie
where was
Stewart.
It in LA? Where was it in LA?
It was Martell and Beverly, Hollywood, West Hollywood. Again, so Union was over there on Beverly.
Yeah.
So like James and Eddie were always in our cipher, and Julie had her own whole massive tribe of friends too, and she did
Julie
the same
saying
thing.
92.
There you go. And I saw Pablo Candela too is on the feed, and he asked about Tokyon. How can I forget about Adam? So Tokyon magazine was another amazing, small run magazine.
And what year did London open? And that was in Camden, if I'm not mistaken.
With Sophie Stewart. That came like shortly after, like 93, 94. So we were going to London a lot too.
And is that where you met Hassan? I
knew Hassan through Zach when Zach was living above Empire Management. And that's how Gangstar also, Premier and Guru used to come to the shop all the time, Patrick Moxie. So again, the music, I mean, we haven't fully gotten into it, but the music culture was like deeply woven into 555 Soul.
No, very, very, very much so. Very, very much
more important than the fashion side of it. I'd say it governed us.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that because, we had the music in the early years, but also that continued to talk about how music was woven into the brand and some of those people and experiences.
Well, early on, like I mentioned, all the clubs, we were all part of the clubs. If my, a lot of my friends were DJs or MCs. So people were looking to like kind of dress up a bit. So it was just kind of connected like that. I mean, the DJ culture was always like really important to me and always, around to me. I mean, your parties were like amazing, Maurice. Like, I look going through your archives, looking at all your flyers, I'm just like, oh my God, we had so many great parties. I mean, from Femi Kuti to all the Gil Scott Heron ones, Bootsy.
Yeah,
I've seen so many incredible artists because of you. It's pretty awesome. The summer stage parties. Let's not forget.
Oh yeah.
Our Miami, the Giant Steps rooftop. Giles Peterson.
Yeah,
it's all good.
You were literally handcrafting all the clothes, and then it gets to the point where you physically can't do it all yourself. Talk about how you kind of scaled that process and the sort of trust giving it to other people to do for you, and because it's all about growing and scaling. You can't be just a one
man, one girl show.
Yeah.
I basically, being on Ludlow and the Lower East Side, I met these women who were doing small run production out of their apartments and then out of like basement storefront places. So I basically would cut all my hoodies and hats and give them piecework to do. So I was working with local ladies pretty much. And then as it grew, I met this gentleman, Jeff Tweedy. He was actually working for Spike Lee doing 40 Acres and a Mule. And he used to come into the store super impressed and just like, oh, this is great. He's like, you got to get your shit together. And basically gave me the name of a factory in Chinatown when we used to have factories there. So this guy took me in, and he was, you know, it kind of worked to my advantage being a woman and also being so young and kind of funky, I guess. You know, I just worked. It worked in a sense where these people would be like, who are you? Like, what are you doing? I guess that goes back to the working hard ethic that I didn't know I was doing, but I was, yeah, definitely hustling. But, you know, he took me on. And at that point, it was just like I was ordering like thousands and thousands of dollars in fabric to like meet orders for stores in Japan, for stores throughout the country. And it was a lot. I kind of got in over my head at one point, and that's when I partnered with Troy after I had opened my store on Lafayette. And again, he was kind of like, oh, you got to get your shit together. I feel like all these men have come in my life like, you got to get your shit together. Your company's amazing. Here, call this person, do this person. But I had already opened Lafayette Street, again, off the strength of friends helping me and pulling together and making it happen. And then when I partnered with Troy, he was, you know, he took it to like another level, like to the next level of like production. And that's when we started going out to Magic.
Right. I was going to talk about that because, I mean, the streetwear trade show phenomena, which was huge. I mean, do they still exist? I don't even know.
I don't know.
But, yeah. But we, I mean, we had the Giant Step line as well, you know. Yeah. So talk a little bit about that experience, because those things were very, very important. Yeah.
Well, I remember I was kind of like by a few friends, I'm not going to name drop, but that, you know, they kind of frowned upon it. Like I was kind of, you know, in our time, it wasn't cool to expand or make money or like, you know, all our, we were just concerned about being cool. And it definitely isn't like what it is now to like get paid and make money. But they kind of thought I was a little selloutish by going to Magic. But then I had like ASR to balance it out with, which was like a cool kind of surf skate show. But I thought it was a fun hustle because there was also like people like Colin Sutton. They did that. Was it not ASR, but there was a spin-off from it. I forget the name. It was out in San Diego. But again, it was like, you know, the smaller mom and pop businesses doing it.
Ian Nice is on it. He said 432F. Yeah. Thank you.
And it's funny. I wish I was sitting by it, but I have this amazing painting that when Stash, Sir, and Stash had Subway at the time, we did a booth together at 432F, and Futura took one of his paintings and basically did a stripe across it and made a sign. I'll post it so people can see. It's like pretty incredible.
And you know, we got into sort of like streetwear for a quick minute, which seemed like a very good idea at the time because our t-shirts were doing well, until I got into the business and we had no idea how the business worked. So we go to these trade shows, we get all these orders, and then the team would come back and they go, oh, we got $200,000 worth of orders. I go, congratulations. They're like, well, now you need to come up with $100,000 to make everything. And
yes, exactly.
You know, so how did you, I mean, how did you cope with that? I mean, I was like, we're getting out of this business, and we kind of focused on our
new thing. I come up with $35,000 to buy fabric on, so I would get deposits from people. But
so you were robbing Peter. You were literally robbing Peter to pay Paul in order to
I wasn't robbing anyone.
No, but you know what I mean. You were getting a deposit and then using that deposit to probably fulfill an order for somebody else, and then getting an order.
And it was a bunch of little like kind of broke ass stores like mine. Like we were all just, but I was figuring it out as I went along. Like we didn't have seasons, you know. It would be like cold out, and I'm like, okay, let's get some wool and make some like sweaters, or let's make a sweater, and then I would find a manufacturer to help me do it.
And also in those days, I mean, it wasn't easy to, you know, get credit cards with the amount, you know, to be able to put it on a credit card, even get a bank loan. I mean,
we couldn't rent cars in LA for sure.
No, it was very hard. It was very hard to get money back then. I just remember it was, and
For sure.
Sometimes you couldn't even get money from a cash machine in a different state because
Right.
it wouldn't take your card because it was from a New York bank.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, in the Ludlow days, it was very affordable to be an artist, right? My
Right.
rent was like $500. Again, the landlord would always let me slide or be late on the rent type thing. I mean, to make a few sales to like buy more material, that was my goal. Run around the corner and get more fabric.
And I kind of I got a little ahead of myself, but I wanted to talk about you again being one of the first people to go into Williamsburg and set up your operation there.
That was interesting.
Because I mean Williamsburg is so close, but we were all in Manhattan. It was like another world. Why would you want to
Yeah.
go there? And I think you were on Berry Street, right?
We were on, yeah. So when I opened the Lafayette store, that's when I met Troy, and he had stepped to me like, let me partner with you. Let me help you take this to the next level. Come see me. He was like Long Island City. And then when we partnered, we opened up an office in Berry, on Berry.
Yeah.
So there was like no one, there was a record label. I'm forgetting the name if anyone remembers, but that's how I met I'm blanking. I'll get back to you. But there was a small record label. It was right next to Brooklyn Brewery. But yeah, it was space, right? We had like a 10,000 square foot loft.
It was huge. And didn't you have some sort of scruffy kids from Canada set up in your office as well?
Those guys. They came when we moved to White. So the big reveal is the Vice magazine guys. So Shane and Sarouche were friends of mine because, again, that was another friends had a small store in Montreal. Shane had actually flown me to Montreal to hang out, and he was like doing his whole punk phase at the time and had a store, but he was my Canadian distributor, the Vice guys. So when they set up in New York, they took a corner office. Yeah, that's how I met like Ben Dietz as well. And yeah, shout out to Vice magazine.
Vice magazine, Vice media.
Vice global. No, we'll keep it old school.
Yeah, Vice magazine.
Black and white magazine.
Yeah.
It was super naughty too, remember?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was I mean, it was totally,
It's kind of trashy actually. I was like,
I mean, my early memory of a Vice party was just basically, somebody throwing up in the corner, it was like
it was a good party though.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, after Berry you went to Wythe, right?
We expanded some more and had it. At that point, it was like the height of exposure, and like that's when I had 3 stores in Japan. The London store was still going, LA store was still going, I think, and distribution was definitely international. We had people in Sweden, like we had people everywhere at that point.
I think another thing, you had this global distribution. Talk a little bit about sort of what I call the homogenization of sort of like global fashion, the way that streetwear, it became everywhere. You would find it all over the world. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about that and how you think that came about,
Yeah, I mean, I think then, in the first 5 years, it probably wasn't even called streetwear, right? I mean, hip hop wasn't even on the radio then, right? It was just this downtown kind of mashup, mix up of music and types of people, right? It was like when house music was still popular.
And there was house and hip hop as well. I mean, like Jungle Brothers, Girl I'll House You was a hip hop band doing a house song,
very pivotal. Delight opening up for Jungle Brothers at like Hotel Amazon. Mm-hmm. We'd go to Save the Robots, The World. I remember I actually, before living on Ludlow, I remember living in an apartment across from The World.
I love The World. I loved it. That was my favorite club. Yeah.
That was so good.
I used to go there.
We're jumping around, but it's like, oh man, the memories just keep coming.
3 nights a week. Thursday night was Dave Piccioni. I'm going to get it wrong, but the 3 DJs were Dave Piccioni from Black Market, Frankie Knuckles, and David Morales.
Exactly.
And it was like,
and you could keep going and Save the Robots around the corner.
And then when it finished, you'd go around the corner to Save the Robots. And
oh my God. It's just so interesting how music and the club culture is so woven into like what our business was, right?
Yeah.
Like I was definitely probably just as focused on that as I was maintaining my business.
Right, but you maintained it and you grew it. You know,
Yeah.
because I think there are, you know, it's a lot of fun, this whole sort of this culture, but there are also a lot of
Yeah.
pitfalls as well. And
Yeah.
you know, you kept your eye, you kept very focused on what you were trying to do, whereas, you know, unfortunately, some people, you know, got caught up in the sort of the whole sort of glamour of, because
Yeah.
going out is fun, you know.
I mean, it's a fine line, right? Like when friends were kind of saying, "Oh, that's such a sellout thing to do, like to go out to Vegas to expand to the trade shows." But then with that came like, well, I'm going to bring my friend Mark Ronson to DJ in my Japan store, or Stretch Armstrong, or like, you know, a whole hip hop band, like, or bring Rocksteady crew to come perform at my fashion shows. So with that, it's like, you know, the expansion, I kept it fun and I kept it real. Like, again, it was still within our tribe and our community, like bringing together this whole energy, right? That I, you know, I never really got up on a stage or in an interview and said me, 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 me. I always kind of made it like an us, a we, a community type thing, because I feel like that's what it was always.
Yeah, and you know, like a strong tide lifts all boats. So by
Yeah.
you having success, you brought a lot of people up with you and gave them you know, gave them opportunities, you know, definitely. Um, you know, and talking about sort of like the sort of like that next phase, you know, in the late 80s, it was sort of De La Soul, and then in the sort of like the mid 1990s, it was Most Def that was really like wearing a lot of your clothes, you know. And
Yeah. Well, again, the small record labels, right? Raucous Records was like epic, right?
right.
Raucous Records, again, friends running this cool company that, you know, I think Raucous was doing like all my street teaming, which was like go put stencils and stickers up everywhere. We didn't have Instagram, remember?
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I had Brian on about 3 weeks ago as my guest.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, he's doing good. He's in LA, um, and
Awesome.
I think
And
we
we
talked
also
a
had
little.
Lyricist Lounge too, right? David
Right.
Castro.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, so there was all these small, like independent brands, if you know, to describe them as like record labels, magazines, and we all kind of supported each other. And even when they got bigger, like Source Magazine, Vibe Magazine, you know, we things sort of started branching, but I feel like I always kind of just stuck to like what I did, and people wanted to call it streetwear, people wanted to call it urban, you know, so it was always like, to me, in my opinion, just like this whole downtown New York kind of culture, right? And lifestyle and international, you know, like we just, it was, yeah, it was a whole tribe of us.
And did mainly your influence came from New York, or as you expanded and you traveled more, were you then getting influences from other places that you were
You know,
in?
I think it was always rooted in downtown New York for sure. I mean, Japan definitely was definitely like subscribing to New York culture, which I always kind of found interesting because I was so obsessed with Japanese culture. But they loved what we were about in downtown New York. I mean, for like Crazy Legs and Tony Touch and artists like that to go over there, or Stretch to go over there, like that was just like it for them, you know?
And Julie just said sort of first female of streetwear, and that brings up a question. How was it being a woman in this field, which is, I would say, mainly dominated by men?
All men.
Yeah, yeah. So how was that for you? I mean, you know,
I
you're,
know.
you
I
know,
don't know. I think about it now and I'm like, I just kind of rolled with it. Like a lot of my friends at the time were men. I mean, I had my girls close to me always at my side. There was only a few other artists, musicians, and designers also doing it. There was only a handful of us women, right?
hmm.
But I never really it never really got in my way. I never really had to utilize it or work it. If anything, just the creative angle always worked for me, and maybe my age and being so energetic and positive about like what I'm doing
But
kind of helped me.
you also have to be very determined and tough as well sometimes in order to, because I'm sure there was a lot of mansplaining going on a lot of the time with you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
there was definitely moments like, again, I'm thinking back on this oral history, like, yeah, definitely some crazy times up in the clubs, definitely crazy times dealing with like record label industry people. I mean, I remember things like Puffy was like a stylist at Uptown Records. He would come into the store and I was so like curious, just like, what, and then to be making stuff for like Jodeci and Mary J. Blige, like that was just like amazing to me because again, the music was just so like a part of what I loved.
So, I mean, is there anything else you want to talk about with Triple Five Soul? 'Cause I'd love to get on with, so what you've been doing since, because you've been doing amazing stuff since as well. So,
Oh,
anything you want to add?
no, do we have any questions?
Well, I mean, I want to talk to you. So you left Triple Five Soul and you opened up this beautiful Airbnb
Yeah.
up in the Catskills, which again, kind of a little bit, I would say, before your time, a pioneer
Yeah.
doing that. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
after, I just wanted to depart ways like from the partner I had at the time. Just things were getting a little out of control,
mhm.
a little toxic, and I just kind of maybe got a little burnt from the growth of the
Sure.
business
Yeah.
and the direction. And we kind of lost sight of what I believed in, which was community, right?
Hmm.
Like I'd love to have had Triple Five Soul Sounds, Triple Five Soul Cafe. And there was always like these brick walls in front of me, like, why?
Hmm.
But why? And I'm like, because we have to. And so when I parted ways, like in 2000, one or two, something like this, almost 20 years, I went on to just make my art and like get back to the sewing machine. And I did a show down at, what is it, Art Basel, one of the first Art Basels, like a group show with some of our painter crew. And that was fun. And then I started taking on projects like home good stuff or interior stuff. And then I decided I wanted a family. So I, yeah, made two amazing kids. And at the same time, of course, because maybe I do like to work and go crazy while I was pregnant, bought a property upstate in the Catskills thinking, oh, we could raise our kids in the country. And we opened a bed and breakfast. There wasn't even Airbnb at the time.
Right.
And decided to open a cafe over here in Fort Greene, like a pop-up
It was
cafe. It
cool,
was like
and
for about a year.
the bed and breakfast was called the Breathe In, right? Which
Breathe
is a
in.
great name. Great name. Yeah.
So it was Brooklyn's country house. And again, I love this idea of just bringing the community to me. So it was everyone's country house. So
Yeah.
I met a lot of great people, and all my friends would come up, and it was a great place to raise the babies. So we were coming back and forth. I'm still in my same place 20 years now in Fort Greene.
Again, you were one of the first people in, well, not the first, but like, moving to that neighborhood, and now that neighborhood is like,
I
it's,
know. A whole
it's
other level
crazy,
now.
a whole other level. Yeah.
I mean, well,
Um,
I went to Pratt in the 80s, so it was kind of incredible that a friend of mine's like, well, I have this brownstone in Fort Greene, come take a look at it. And of course I walked in and was just like in love, but I was looking to purchase, to buy property when things were like going really well for me. And I had the
yeah.
option to do Soho, which at that time was just getting so disgusting and like so
Yeah.
commercial. I was like, oh, I'll give it a try. And again, I brought the community to me. So I put in the turntables,
Hmm.
and then Eben and I would throw dinner parties and dance parties, and the rest
And
was
garden parties, and yeah,
all of
yeah,
it. It's
yeah,
still happening. Once we get
yeah.
out of COVID, everyone's invited.
And tell us a little bit about, if you don't mind, if you are open to it, about your new venture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, prior to COVID, I've always been dabbling with like, what should I do? And I know I love sitting and sewing and making things. So I was doing a lot of one-off things. And then I thought it would be interesting to do a brand that, again, that was community driven, could build some, awareness and connect people on that level. So I started a small company called Goodgood Community. And then the pandemic hit, so I was like, oh, let me just start making masks for everyone. Everyone's going to need them. I knew about the whole mask thing by going to Japan all these years. So I basically started sewing and making masks for all my friends and neighbors, and then turned it into a little business. And then it was a perfect jump off for me to get my blankets going, because I really love the idea of park culture and people, gathering outdoors together. So I've been making quilts and blankets.
And where can people find these?
They're going to be on my website soon. Right now, I think, all the collaborations I did with some art collectives and some friends for the masks, but that I've kind of, stopped making unless people, reach out and need some stuff. But I'd say for spring, it'll drop. And then my plan is to approach friends, companies, and brands to get their dead stock material, because that's what I was doing with the masks. I don't really want to purchase new material. I don't think we need it, which is why I've been kind of reluctant to start a fashion brand. I just don't think this planet needs it or we can sustain it. So I know people have tons of dead stock fabric and even garments, and just to like upcycle it and resew it into new things or bespoke things that people have for a long time. That's kind of my plan.
That's awesome. I can't wait to start seeing all that stuff, and I can't wait to have some hangs again as well.
Right.
We're almost out of time, and we get cut off exactly on the point. So is there anything else you wanna add? I mean, this has been amazing catching up with you.
I mean, I'm loving going through your archives. It's been so awesome, the photos and just the memories of the parties you've done, Maurice. You're like definitely a pioneer in the music world, and you meant a lot to my brand and us as a
and vice versa. I mean, we kind of pulled each other up by the bootstraps.
Yeah,
you know what
without
I mean?
even knowing it.
Yes,
well,
exactly.
We were having fun dancing on the dance floor.
Yeah. All the
It's
sneakers.
been great.
Yeah.
Totally.
Well, thank you so much, Camella, for joining. It's really been awesome. Want to let everyone know that we're going to be back again next week, Friday, at 5 p.m. And we're going to have Giles Peterson joining me. So we're going to be talking to him about what he's been up to. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. And please visit giantstep.net/the vault, and you'll see some great pictures of Camella from back in the day. And that's it. Stay safe, everyone.
Giles Peterson. Nice.
Have a great weekend.
Bye,
Stay
everyone.
safe. Bye. Take care. Thank you for joining. Bye-bye.